I want to show you my workflow, and I also want to say I'm a little bit intimidated by this because I know that for uh, uh, photographers, how they edit is a kind of a highly personal thing, and people can also be really judgmental about how people edit their photos. Uh, I am in the learning process. I am not a professional with this. I am at the hobby level, and I have changed my workflow in the last year, and especially as I have purchased Topaz. Uh, I find it to be really exciting. But I just want to kind of talk through this. When I put my arrow up here, are you seeing that arrow? Thumbs up. You see that arrow? Okay. So I shoot everything in RAW. And so the Adobe way of being able to look at those RAW files and then bring them into Photoshop is to use Adobe Bridge. And so what Adobe Bridge looks like is this. And then if I want to see a file, I would click on the space bar and then that file comes up and I'm able to see it. So this is Adobe Bridge, and I'll go back to that, what I was showing you. Let's go back to print shop. Yeah, I'll get there. There we go. So once I hit that I want to go into Photoshop, it brings it up in Adobe Raw. And so this is the Bridge version of, I mean, Adobe Bridge is like Lightroom in organizing the photos, but RAW allows you to have the sliders. And so I'll show you that I adjust light levels while I'm in the Adobe Raw. And then after adjusting that, I bring it into Photoshop. And the reason I bring it into Photoshop is that it creates a layered workflow. And being able to create layers allows me to change any of the work. If there's something I don't like, I just delete it, and it didn't mess up anything because I have layers. And then of all the, there are a whole lot of things that you can buy in Topaz. You can buy the suite so that you end up with all of it. But if there's just one thing that you're going to buy in Topaz that makes a phenomenal difference, and I'll show you that, it is Topaz denoise. If there's only one that you get that one. If the photo needs to be sharpened any, then I will take it into sharpen. I will occasionally take it into mask, but I don't usually. And then I almost always, and all the asterisks here indicate I almost always do these. And then I do the final edit in Photoshop. Topaz, I use all of these except for mask. I use all of these as add-ons into Adobe Photoshop. And so in Adobe Photoshop, and we'll go off the denoise and then back to the Photoshop. And so it's just a plugin that allows me to use that without feeling like it's a separate program. If I get to the end of this and I make it pop, clean it up, do all the magic in Photoshop, if I feel like that the picture is too small and it's going to, if I expand it onto I'm on a 20-some inch iMac screen that is super high resolution, and if I bring it up and it in that little tiny picture, I want to upscale it, and so I do that in this what they call gigapixel, and that is part of that Topaz suite that you can buy. So let me go through a workflow with one picture, and then I have other pictures that I've just saved, and I can show you that workflow, what's already been done, and I can do that in Photoshop here. So I'm going to go to Bridge, and I want to work with this photo here. And this is a raw file photo taken in Steigerwald the very last day that I was there. I hid in the trees while there were hundreds and hundreds of people coming. It was just really overcrowded and uncomfortable, and I didn't want to be out there. So I went and hid in the pine trees in the parking lot, and there were some currants. And so I am in the pines, the currants where I shot this hummingbird are out in front of me, but the sun is almost at that time almost overhead. And so it was extreme conditions to be shooting in. But because I'm shooting in RAW, it allows me to adjust this. Now you'll notice up here on the flowers, that even though I have exposure compensated 1 and possibly 2 f-stops, I really pulled it down so that I'm underexposing this, because I didn't want to completely blow out any of the whites on this flower or any parts of this hummingbird. So now that I have this and I'm looking at this in Adobe Bridge, I want to bring it into RAW. And so to do that, I just hit O for open. And that this is going to open this in this bridge to, or in the Adobe RAW, which is part of Photoshop. It's kind of a pre-adjustment. So I hit that, and this should bring it right into Photoshop for me. Or this is where I do a little bit of adjusting. And I'm going to need to pull people over here so I can see this adjustment. And so this is a raw file. And so I can get the most changes that I need while it's in RAW. And so I want to adjust the light here. And I might bring up the exposure a little bit, but I especially want to bring up the shadows. And so you can see that the darker parts of this start coming up, and I'm starting to see some detail of that bird. So I play with this. I might want to bring the highlights down a little bit because, again, I'm trying to keep those flowers from being totally blown out up above. And I might bring up the light just a bit. And then coming back here, I can go down and adjust the vibrance. You can start seeing that color come into the hummingbird some more, a little bit on the saturation. Then I'll come over, maybe adjust the light a bit. And really, light is the main thing that I want to work with. With all the other software I have, working with the light in a RAW allows me to come a long way with this. I'm going to bring up the shadows just a little more. And then also I'm going to go up and boost the orange in that bird, maybe a little bit on the red. And this is ready for Photoshop to start doing the workflow that I showed you. And so I just hit open image here, and it should bring it into Lightroom. And now, excuse me, it should bring it into Photoshop, and that's where we're at. I am going to back out of what I just did because I forgot an important piece. I'm just going to do a file, and I'm going to close this file. Don't save it. I'm going to go back to Bridge. Okay. Anyway, there we go. So this is where we were at with this, and I wanted to bring it into Photoshop. And here we go. Here we go. Now we're in the right place. I try to go with a 4 to 5 crop on this, and I usually do this while I'm in RAW before I bring it into Photoshop because this allows me those choices. And I do the 4 to 5 crop because that is the Instagram crop. And so let's see, somewhere here-ish, like in that whole flower up above. Anyway, I'm not going to spend a lot of time getting real detailed about this, but I like to get that crop it here. And now I'm going to just open it up. There we go. So there is the crop. I'm now in Photoshop. I'm going to get it to where we can see that better. When I zoom in on this, you can see that there's noise. All right. Now, the next thing I'm going to show you is what I call a miracle. And yeah, well, the reason that I'm in Photoshop, if you look over here, you can see that there are layers. Are you able to see this on your screen where I'm showing you the layer? It shows the background. In Photoshop, the main reason for using it is that it allows you to create these layers. And so I don't want to mess with that, what I brought in from RAW. And so I say Command J or Control J on the PC, and I hit that, and Command J makes a new layer. And so this layer, I am going to call the denoise layer. And for denoise, I'm going to work with that layer. I don't want to work with the background layer. So I click on denoise, and then I go to the filter, and all the way at the bottom, it has Topaz Labs. And I go to Topaz Denoise. And again, this is the piece of software. I think it costs $79. I would pay $700 for it now that I've had it and used it. And I'll show you why. It's just it's crazy how good this is. So I'm going to do a split screen so you can see the before and the after. We can slide across it. So here's the amount of noise before, and then this is after. Can you see that on your screens? Can you see the difference? It basically just wipes out the noise. And so I'm going to do a auto detect on this and just have it do it at an auto level. I would spend a lot more time probably trying to make sure I kept all the detail that I wanted in this. But when I do auto, that's not bad. And again, before, after. Now, there's another one over here. If there's very little noise, AI clear. And so both of these use artificial intelligence to figure out what it is you want to keep and take out the noise everywhere else. And so it's pretty sophisticated when it comes to noise removal. I am going to apply that. I might ask, are there any questions here on as far as denoise?
Karen asks, do you need Photoshop to use Topaz denoise?
I did not hear the word, do I need what?
Do you need Photoshop?
No. It can be a standalone. Good question. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm going to hit apply, and this brings that back into Photoshop. It also is, I mean, it's a pretty intensive process, and so it's applying it to the entire picture now and processing this. So this workflow is not speedy unless you have a super computer. Mine is not a supercomputer, but it's pretty good. So that is denoise. If this photo, and I'm going to zoom in just a little bit on it. If this photo were not sharp, I would, like when I look at that eye, that's not bad. And I'm not going to slow us down by this, but I would then go and do Topaz sharpen if it wasn't sharp. But this looks actually pretty sharp. And so I'm going to keep it at that. My next workflow, if I don't take it into sharpen, is to go into Topaz adjust. And so I'm going to create a new layer by going to the denoise layer, Command J. So now I have a copy of that. And I'm going to go in and say, let's call this one adjust. So now, while I'm in the adjust layer, and again, I want to make sure I'm clicked on that adjust layer. I go to filter, Topaz Labs, and then I go to adjust. This has some presets that I really like. I could, in the past, I would just spend my time working with all the sliders in Photoshop and would be able to make this photo pop. I feel like Topaz Adjust has some really nice presets. And when I first click on these presets, and Jared knows this, but when I first click on these presets, you're going to go, oh, it's too much. But it gets you started in the right direction. And then there's this opacity slider down here that allows us to pull back. And so this is what we had in Photoshop. This is what we got after denoise. If I wanted to work on getting it brighter and more detailed, I would pop here. And then that ends up making it more detailed and brighter. And if I take the opacity slider back, you can see that it has, okay, here's what it regularly looks like. This is what it was. And then if I pull this up slowly, you can see that it is doing some work there. I think that the one that I'm going to do for this one, though, is the daylight one. And it way overdoes it. But if I pull this back, you can actually find a place. Okay, here's where it is baseline. Oops. And then if I pull it up, you can see it starts to pop a little more. And I'm going to pull it up about there. And it's not exactly where I would want it, but I'm going to go ahead and keep that one and apply it. And this takes me back into Photoshop. So when I click back on this, you can see we have an adjust layer. So if we looked at, well, what did these things do? I'm going to zoom in on it just a little bit. You can see this was the base picture. Then if I click here, this there's a little eyeball that will appear that allows us to see denoise, what it did. And then if I click on the adjust layer, it shows what adjust did. And so I hardly ever stop with adjust. I would want to finish this out. And so I usually make some kind of final layer here, and I'll go Command J. And we'll now create a final layer with this. Just call it final, a final. Okay, so in this case, what I would do is I would change some things so that it makes it right where I want it to be. And so one thing that I'm looking at is I would like it to be possibly a little brighter. And so if I bring this up, boom, there we go. Looking a little better. I think I like that. Say, okay, got that. And while I'm in this layer, I might say, you know what? I find these flowers down here, I find that annoying because it's not wholly there. It's not completely there. And if I'm going to have that, I would like for it to all be there. And so then you can just basically make distractions go away. So let's see if there's anything else. Yeah,
Ken, I didn't see how you did that.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to do a edit and undo spot healing. So the spot healing brush is over here in the left-hand menu on that bar on that side. And it's important that you have it the right size. And so I just happened to have it big because I knew I was going to do that. But if I let's say, for instance, so this is absolutely absurd, but let's say I wanted to take the eye out of this hummingbird. And it's like, yeah, I don't want an eye. And so it gets rid of that. So no, really, I want to keep the eye. Photoshop knows better than that. So I'll do it, undo that. But if I'm going to take out something big, I would want that brush that spot healing to be pretty good sized. And so that's what I'm doing when I do this, is just saying, hey, I don't want that. And Photoshop tries to determine what it is that you want it to be. So it looks at the pixels that are around everything that it was like that. You'll notice that there's kind of a line here that I don't really like having that line. And so I will go over to smudge. And I'm going to make my smudge thing a little bigger here. And I will just kind of smudge to blur out that so that it doesn't look quite so abrupt. Sometimes when you make things go away, it'll kind of leave some lines there. So anyway, that is pretty close to what I would like. I want to go over to this. There's a little tool over here that I like, and it's, let's see, you're covering it up, aren't you? There's a tool here that is the dodge or the burn. If you want to make something lighter, you can do the dodge tool. And like right in here, I might want to make that just a little brighter. And so I lighten up whatever areas I touch with this. And you'll know up here, I'm only doing 5%. I could bring that up more to get a bigger effect. But this allows me to maybe bring out some more of that iridescence in the throat. And maybe that I don't like the harshness of that shadow. And so those are the types of things that I would do while being in Photoshop and before the final. Just kind of as a general principle, I often on that final one will go over to the image and I say, what is the auto tone? And I know because of experience on this one, it's going to look terrible. I don't like the auto tone. And so I would go edit, undo. But boy, sometimes like for the sparrows that I'm going to show you today, that it really made it pop when I do that auto tone. So basically that's my workflow. I would, if I go ahead and hit save on this, I'm going to do a save as and call it a, there we go. It's I'm going to say Rufus. Again. And I'm saving that in my photo group. So if I want to access that picture, if I'm going to take this to the internet, I would want to share it with people. I would want to go file and then export it as probably as a JPEG. So anyway, that's the workflow that I have. I want to, I'll stop and ask if there are questions. I think it might be a good time to do that. And then I'll just go through and just show you what I've already done on some other photos.
Ken?
Yes.
This is Dave. So you go from Bridge to Adobe Raw. Have you experimented with Lightroom at all as a step in there? Or?
Adobe Raw has all of the same sliders as Lightroom, and so if I'm shooting with when I'm shooting these raw files, everything that you can do in Lightroom, you have those sliders available to you within Raw. And so the reason I do this is I am a lot of wildlife photographers that have posted their workflow. Someone that I really respect are doing it this way. And so one of the main functions of Lightroom is to organize your pictures. And so I do that in a Bridge, which then takes me into RAW, and then I can do everything you do in Lightroom. It's just a matter of finding it. But you could do, I think it is possible to bring RAW into Lightroom and to work with them. I just, when I went through an Adobe site as to, okay, what's the prime workflow for RAW files, this is what has come up for me.
Okay.
Good question. Any others?
One more, Ken.
What's that?
I got a follow up. So the Photoshop you're using is the latest and greatest Photoshop, or you have a subscription?
That's a good question. Yeah, I have the Photoshop CC. It's online. I pay, I don't know, $10 a month or something. Oh.
So Martin asked if what a basic software to start out with would be.
Oh boy, yeah, that's an interesting question. So are we talking about basic as far as being similar to Photoshop? Because I understand that there are free ones that are available, and often ones come with your camera. And you can also work within the photo programs that are preloaded onto both PCs and onto Macs to do some basic editing, like adjusting the light.
Yeah, I would probably chime in there and say that when I had my Canon T2i that I bought 11 years ago or so, I was using Canon software up until I switched to Nikon, and then I just started using the software that Nikon recommended, which was their software, and I'm using their basic software now. I definitely don't have as many options as Photoshop has here that Ken's showing us, but I have the basic things that can enhance a photo really easily, so I can adjust the highlights and the shadows and crop. I mean, those, like Ken said, it's all about adjusting the light and shooting in RAW and having software that can handle RAW is kind of key.
Can I also like to add, this is where, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I use Lightroom primarily. So I'm a RAW photographer. I use Lightroom. For some reason, Photoshop and layers I find very confusing, although Ken, this is the easiest I've been able to understand them. But I do jump into Photoshop to use the edit tools for erasing and healing, patching, things like that are pretty easy to use. And then from Lightroom, you can also have a plugin to Topaz, just like Photoshop does.
Yeah. Thanks for making a comment about the layers, because as you're looking at the layers for what we just did over here, when I turn these layers off, just kind of remember when I'm at that bottom layer, if I hit Command J, that produces the new layer, a copy of that. And then I work with this layer, the next one up, and that allowed me to go into denoise. And then if I wanted to make another adjustment, then I hit Control J and make a new one. And I just really like being able to go back and work with, see what my workflow is. I'll show you a different hummingbird, the one that I was just a little closer to. This is the final of it. Here was the adjust. Here was the denoise. And then this is the original, and I'll bring it up a little bit. It had a little less noise than the Hummingbird that we just did. But again, there's with denoise, here's with adjust, and then this was the final. And so the idea is to try to make things pop a bit. I want to show you another one here. This Anna's. I go back to the bridge for this. I'm going to hit escape so I can see where I'm at on this. But in bridge, this was the original photo. And then I brought it into RAW and cropped it, and then brought it into Photoshop. And I'll show you here it was. This is just kind of a really privileged shot because I am shooting in underneath some berries at this super hidden nest. And she is to the point where she trusts me. I've been there 4 times now, and she just comes in and feeds and doesn't seem to be bothered by this. I'm about 20 feet away when I do these shots. You can see that there is noise. I denoise it. It looks a little flat. I hit the adjust. I used a different adjust there, and I feel like it brought out too much detail, but I just am using it as an example. I then did a final adjustment, and it was kind of interesting because this final adjustment was, I didn't originally make it this dark, but Photoshop allows you to do masks. And so I want to show you this up here. This is actually a mask of what was down below. And so what I did on this final adjustment is I went up to my select and I said, please select, ooh, I'm in the wrong one. Need to be in that final one. There we go. I said, please select my subject. And give it a second here while it processes it. And it said, okay, I see, your subject is that bird. And so I said, copy. I did a Control-C, and then I hit paste, and it produced a new layer, and that's a subject mask. I darkened the final, and then I lightened just her so that she would pop, stand out a little more. And so Photoshop allows you to do these masks. You can also do that with Topaz. Let me do actually, I'll just get out of that. I want to show you a Lincoln Sparrow that I actually shot this morning, and I'm going to go to bridge, hit escape, go to bridge. I think that I actually brought up the wrong RAW of this. Yes, I did. I brought up the wrong RAW, but it was just, that's how far away it was. It was in that position. And so then I brought it into Photoshop. You'll notice when I go in on this a little bit, there's a lot of noise. This was kind of darkened in the forest. And so denoise, you see the difference? And it's not super sharp, so I sharpened it. And you can see, like, if you look just at the eye, this is without the sharpening, and this is with the sharpening. And that is Topaz sharpen. I then hit adjust. And I'm going to zoom out so you can see this a little better. For the final, I went up and basically just hit, I wanted that image, and I did an auto tone, and I like that auto tone better. And you'll also note, look at the things that I took out. I thought that this thing up here was annoying. Let's see if there was anything else. Yeah, and the things down below, down on the bottom right, I found those distracting. This would be, you can remove things like this, but then you have to recreate the tail. And so that is more complicated than I want to work with today. if I was doing a contest photo, I might go ahead and remove this also. Let's see if there's one more here. Oh, I wanted to show you on this one also. This is, you'll note that it's at 108%. In other words, when I cropped in on it, I cropped so tight that this picture is actually pretty small. And so I took it into gigapixel, and this is the same picture in gigapixel. And I'm betting on your screens, you can't tell the difference, but on my iMac, you can tell this is a better picture than this one. And that it doesn't, again, you're probably not seeing that difference, but yeah, taking it into gigapixel, you can, it's at 1.5 that I scale it up, but you can scale it up as many as 16 times that in gigapixel, so you could put it on an entire wall. One more here. Here is a Nashville warbler shot a couple days ago. Here's with denoise, and again, I'll take it up a little bit. Here's without the denoise. Here's with denoise. This is sharpened, and again, notice the eye. The eye is the most important thing about when you're sharpening things. The adjust, and then the final. And I just want you to know, look at the aphid it has at the tip of its beak, which is the reason I chose that one. It's carefully picking the aphids out of those flowers. So there you go. I think that is all I have. Yep, it is. So I am open for questions, or Jared, we can go wherever you want to with it at this point.
Yeah, so Corey had mentioned in the chat, so you all can see in the chat box, that her WSU photography instructor recommended GIMP and RAW therapy. When I was looking into this, I also saw GIMP as a good recommendation, which is free, and it kind of mimics Photoshop. And then Pat, you just raised your hand. You're on mute.
I was just trying to wave.
Oh.
Thank you very much for the show.
Oh.
I'll stop sharing this unless there are questions that are about things that I have up.
No, I'd say you guys are all ahead of me on this stuff, but it's very good knowledge to get started.
Well,
Yes,
I think it's.
Go ahead, Ken.
I think it's. I think I have an airplane flying right by. I don't know if you're hearing the jet outside. I think it's important to see what can be done, and just figure it out a little bit at a time. I have just recently started doing the layers and saving those layers. Even though I knew about layers, I really like the workflow of not working with the previous work. And so I guess where I'm going with it is it's just it's important to see what can be done, and then take a step that direction.
When you end up with layers, are you ending up with a copy of each of those layers in your folder?
No, yeah, it saves it. I think it's a PSD file. Let's see, it should be up here. Yeah, these are files that are. Yeah, I'm looking for what I'm working with here, and it's not showing the entire thing, but it's a print or a Photoshop file.
Okay.
And so all of that information is there. If I want to, I can. And I'm going to not save this, but I'll just show you that with these layers, since it's up here, I can click all of them with a shift key on, and then I can basically say, you know what I'd like to do is to merge those. And then they just all go together. And so then that could just be saved as a JPEG file, a simple file to share on the internet.
I have a question for Ken. So Aiden has been taking, he's taking photography at school, and so I'm thinking, okay, maybe we should go ahead and invest in Photoshop here at home. And the layering definitely looks like a much more sophisticated and advanced part of Photoshop. So if you were to, if you can, like, could you give some recommendations on things for just sort of basic editing in Photoshop for people like me that are a little more novice or very novice?
Sure. I mean,
could I jump in really quick, Ken? This is Corey. I know you don't see me, but I just sent a website to everybody in the chat that was recommended by my WSU instructor as a place where you can go and see free and cheaper options to Photoshop, Illustrator, and other Adobe creative software. So it's got all kinds of information on that site. They just have to copy and paste that. In addition to what you're going to tell us, but
okay.
Down in the chat, that website has a ton of information on it about alternatives to Photoshop.
Yeah, so I am going to bring that picture up. That it was the sparrow that's not in a very good position, and I'm just going to bring it up into Photoshop from here, so that I'm not doing anything with it except I didn't do anything in RAW. I didn't do any, and now I just have it in Photoshop. And so in Photoshop, you can come over here and do your cropping. And so that is basic, allows you to do that. And so again, people are pretty
Actually,
yeah.
Ken, while you're doing the cropping, I recall you one time saying that you want to have your main subject
on the thirds.
We might have lost you, Karen.
Okay, sorry. Can you hear me?
I can now.
Okay. I remember one time you saying that to make a photo more interesting, maybe the bird is not right in the middle. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah. So I mean, there's a lot of different ways to crop. I was kind of going with the Instagram crop here, but you generally want that bird looking into some space. And if you were going to go with a bigger picture, let's say you couldn't make this, you couldn't zoom in on it. It wouldn't look good if you zoomed in on it, and you want to just have it in so that it's in its natural habitat and it shows some habitat around it. Putting it at that 1/3 mark, like if you get tic-tac-toe, you're seeing that on your screen there, is more interesting than putting it like this. It ends up being more pleasing to more eyes to kind of put it, think in terms of thirds. I have often made that eye right on one of those thirds, like right there, maybe. And so that is, research shows that that's the thing that's most pleasing to people's eyes. They also want the bird looking into that space versus having the bird right up against the wall. Like this is not good. And so, yeah, thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you.
So within Photoshop, if you have this, bring it up so we can see it a little better. You can, when you go into the raw filter on this, you can then do some of the color enhancement. Might want to bring it up with give it a little more light. Actually, it doesn't look too bad. You can click on these color bars, and this barrel has some brown in it, so I might want to increase that brown a little bit. And I'm sure there are people out there going, yeah, I have all these ideas too. And again, I haven't picked the prime bird. This is not one that I would mess with because it's not really looking in the right direction. But all these things that are up here are the things that you can find in Lightroom, and you have all those sliders available to you, and so you can do all that within Photoshop. Might want to increase the vibrance a little bit. Oh, one of the things that I would do, the way I used to take a noise out, is with the sharpening here. You can remove some of that noise by taking out the luminescence or sliding that up, and you can see that the noise begins to be reduced. But you can also the noise reduction in Photoshop. I just haven't been able to as easily do it as I do it with topaz denoise, but that is within this sharpening. And if you want to sharpen it some more, you can slide that over. That increases more noise, and so you pull that over. And so anyway, there's this, you're always battling sharpening versus noise. And that's one of the reasons in topaz that it asks you to sharpen first, is so that you can denoise first, is so that you can do the sharpening, all these adjustments. When I sharpen that, it causes more noise, and so Lightroom can be, Photoshop can be challenging in doing that type of thing. But again, here are all your sliders, and you can. Let's see, I'll bring it in. You have to do the adjustments, and then from your Adobe, from that filter up here, which we were just in, it's called Camera Raw Filter. You can do sharpening. There are a host of different things that you can do, and you'll notice I did that just on the background, so that I could show you that yes, you can do a lot of different things. And you don't have to do layers, but again, I could have kept that background, hit Command J, add a layer, and then be working with that so that I didn't mess up the original. Jared, what else would you do in Photoshop or in the basic adjustments?
Gosh, I think that's the most that I have access to with my software.
It's just basically enhancing colors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, one thing I do like to do when I'm in Photoshop, if you go to this dodge tool, you can brighten the eyes up, make the eyes pop a little bit more by just lightening them up. Now, I overdid that, but as a general rule, I do like to make that sparkle pop a little bit if needed. You can sharpen. This triangle over here is a sharpen thing. And so if there are parts of this that are just a little out of focus, you can pull that over and it will sharpen those areas. If you overdo it, like if I just keep doing this, and it introduces noise, which isn't good. But if you want to just bring out a little bit of detail, these are great tools for that. And one of the things that I sometimes do, if I over sharpen, I will blur it and then take out. You'll notice it looks a little crunchy. That's what we call it when people over sharpen. It causes the details to look a little crunchy, and then you can blur those back out. So, yeah.
How did you learn what each of those many little things will do? Just trial and error?
6 years of just editing photos and trying a little bit of something at a time. And I'm amazed when I look at other people's workflow, and people that really know Photoshop, man, they have this thing down, and it blows me away what they can do. Like this stamp tool over here, we can clone this leaf here. I'm gonna go up a little bit bigger and show you this because it's kind of fun. Say you want another leaf, just for the fun of it, we can come over here and say, let get this right. I want to go. So let's let this be what we want. And then I just come over here and I paint it.
Wow.
Funny.
So, yeah.
So again, you can't trust anything you see anymore. Ken may have been in there photoshopping.
Yeah. So yeah, if you want your bird with multiple beaks, just let that be your. Yeah, really, that's a bird with 2 beaks. So
There's all
Photoshop
tutorials in all the programs.
Yeah, I'm sure.
You know, all the programs have tutorials. There's really good Photoshop tutorials out there.
And if there's something that you specifically want to do, just
do it.
look at it for it on YouTube. And there are so many tutorials on YouTube.
Yeah, YouTube is wonderful that way.
Absolutely.
So I know there's a lot of you are very good photographers. Anybody else have any tips? I know Carrie, you've won a couple contests, and Dave, you guys have any tips, any thoughts?
I'll let Carrie chime in.
Yeah, I'm a rank amateur. I have nothing on Ken, let me tell you.
I think we just use the basic tools we've got. I'm limping along still with the last, I think 11-year-old Photoshop CS4, because I just too cheap to pay $10 a month. And so the problem is, the latest Nikon RAW isn't compatible with that. But so Carrie I can't edit her photos from her D850. So for editing her photos, it's primarily the Nikon, the free Nikon photo editing tool and its RAW editor. And then, but since I shoot mainly with my little Sony or my iPhone, I can edit either with actually the free Sony software editing tool I don't like, so I actually still use the Nikon View NX tool. It's pretty darn good. I mean, like you can do a lot of things with light just with that the freebie Nikon View NX, and then that seems to be, I don't have the patience to do much more than that.
So the days are gone. You can't buy Photoshop outright anymore. It used to be you could buy the software, but now you have to pay either an annual or monthly. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a monthly. It's just pretty much like all the other old time software companies. They're all going to a monthly or an annual subscription now. It's rare to be able to buy outright software now.
Topaz is an exception to that. You can buy it, and it isn't a monthly fee.
Okay.
Downside is you have to pay full price.
Okay. All right.
But I think it's a little over $200 for the suite. That includes the basics, including denoise.
Okay.
And this is Laura, if you were shooting in RAW, but wanting to only use Topaz, do you think that would be something you'd recommend?
I'm going to just simply say I don't know.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that Topaz would not allow you to bring in raw files.
Mm. Yeah, I don't know either. It'd be something to look at, because then you might want to consider just for Aiden just skipping Photoshop, Lightroom altogether, and just going with Topaz for him while he's starting everything to learn that way.
They have, as part of that, they have something called Topaz Studio, which is you can do layers just like you do in Photoshop. It has almost all of the Photoshop features, but all the other parts that I just showed you are plugged into that. But that's called Studio, and so I am absolutely sure you can bring raw photos into Studio in some way. So I don't think that would be a worry, but it'd be certainly be something to ask before jumping into it. One thing that I didn't mention is that Topaz, in their workflow, if you want to shoot JPEG, the very first step that they have in their workflow is to convert that JPEG to a RAW. And so evidently, Topaz can work with raw files.
And can I ask a really, really dumb question?
There are no dumb questions.
Well, I know, but does RAW stand for, is it an acronym or is it a description of a photo? And just explain briefly for an idiot like me, what is the difference between the RAW and the stuff I could take normally on a photograph, please? Just
Okay, so first of all, does anybody else know what RAW stands for? Alexa, what does RAW stand for in photos?
Here's something I found on the web. According to Shutterstock.com, RAW is an in-camera mode of capturing images that does not provide any type of processing or adjustment by the camera. Did that answer your question?
No. So I still don't know what RAW stands for. But, you know, our eyes are capable of discerning a lot more than what the camera can, the sensors. We can see brighter, we can see darks, and we can see all those together. What the RAW file does is it brings it in as you see it, or it brings it in as the camera sees it. And instead of adjusting those files so that it looks better, it just is there. There it is. And so they're just that original raw photo is almost always going to need some processing. But what it allows you to do is you can have a photo, well, like those hummingbirds that I showed you. They were looking almost black in places, but I'm able to bring that up. At another time, I shot a Lincoln sparrow, and it looked to me like it was blasted out. And so when I brought it in as a raw file, I just turned the light down, and it looked perfect. And so it allows you to make mistakes as a photographer and then adjust those much better. And at some point, I will find out what RAW means. I can't answer that question.
I didn't know if RAW was an acronym or not. I guess RAW means it is literally what it's saying. It's just a raw version of everything, totally unprocessed. I didn't know, you know, so appreciate the answer, which was very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, and likely you're shooting in JPEG, and so like Ken said, that's the camera making auto adjustments. And when it does that, it doesn't record all the data, which is what makes RAW amazing, is that you have all the data there. You just have to figure out how to bring it out so that it makes the photo look nice. And you just don't have that with JPEG. It's not, you can't manipulate it as well.
The luxury of JPEG is it's fast. You know, you can do some light adjustments on it and make it look good and share it if that's what you want to do, and put it on Instagram. But RAW requires you to sit down and spend some time with it.
And unfortunately, there's multiple RAW formats. So even Nikon changed its RAW format from when it went to the D800 series. So not old software like my CS4 is not compatible with latest Nikon RAW. So you'd think RAW would just be RAW, it would just be the bits, but no, they do something in it to make it particularly to that camera.
Right. They would like for you to be able to look on the back of your camera and be able to see something that is worth seeing. And so I think that's, and I'm trying to get, so they want you to be able to look at that and not just see it as a really dull raw file. And so I think the Nikon one is NEF, and again, I don't know what that stands for, but it's a Nikon raw file.
Mm-hmm.
Ken, will you be offering any more photography classes once we're sort of out of, the COVID-19, whenever that may be, maybe later in the summer or in the fall? Is it possible you'll do another photo class?
I would love to. I would just love to go be with people more than anything. But it'll be really interesting. Those types of things might not happen till 22, 23.
Yeah. Wow.
Being honest about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I'm a male. I have type A blood, and I'm almost 65, and that puts me. Also I have some lung issues from previous farm injuries. So I need to be really careful.
Yeah, and we'll have to see what happens with the refuge closure and things too. We may be getting together somewhere else too when we are able. But for now, we're stuck doing this virtual stuff. So I hope you all learned a little bit today. But I would love to do this again and keep these little get-togethers going. So I was just curious if anybody had any ideas of what you would like to see in the future. I think we're pretty flexible and it's a very informal group, so we can just kind of do whatever. I mean, potentially we could do some sort of in the field work if we could figure out how to video it. But any thoughts, any questions that you want answered in the future?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I did enjoy a long time ago was going out with Ken on in the early Saturday morning doing some bird spotting and what have you. Now, I don't know whether, Ken, you could do some sort of virtual class on, some basic bird spotting, just to give us some. I mean, I'm forever looking at birds and looking them up. It's really nice the way you describe. I know we can't get the sounds there. Well, maybe you can, I don't know. But maybe something like that I would really enjoy.
Yeah.
Agree.
Yeah.
I think it would be really, really nice. I'm really missing going out with Ken and the group again, there are a lot of birds that I recognize either by sight or by ear, but I always learn so much more when I'm out with you, Ken. And so, yeah, I would love, I'm definitely interested in the photography. I know I'm much more novice than some of you, but I would love to just continue this, but also anything birding related, of course, that I'll sign up for that for sure as well. So it would be great if there's somehow you could take us along on one of your birding outings out to the Sandy Delta or wherever you may go somehow.
Well, I'll need to think about that one.
Yeah,
I don't know how that would work. That would be tricky, I guess.
As you know, some of you know, my job that I'm supposed to be doing 3 days a week. And fortunately, I still am being paid for that job. I work for Metro and I'm a classroom presenter. And so I absolutely love getting up in front of classes and engaging them in lessons that are sustainability related. But this has been a real challenge. We are trying to push our materials out that we do during our presentations, and man, it is just not the same sitting in front of a computer and trying to do these presentations. It'll be interesting to see now, how can we convert how can we make a virtual bird walk?
Yeah.
If you have some suggestions,
So I have
let me know.
Question. I have a question. Does everybody know about the Thayer birding software? Thayer, Thayer. He's offering it free to everybody because he's retiring. So if you go to Thayer birding.com, you can get a $75 birding software program for free. It's amazing. It's anything and everything you ever want to know about over 1,000 North American birds.
Wow.
You can create lists. You can create lists. You can, yes, they are birding. You have to put Thayer birding in there. And if you go there, I might be able to just send a link to Jared. He just sent out an email last week that he's offering this birding program to everybody. It's not an app for your phone. It's for a regular computer. So it's
That's
amazing.
great. Thank you. Thanks, Carrie.
Something happening upstairs here.
Is that thunder? Wow. Cool.
Was that thunder?
Wow.
And pushing chairs around upstairs.
Oh, okay.
So a couple ideas I had was just getting together, and we can share. Every one of you could share your screen right now. So an idea for the future is we just get together, and a couple people email me ahead of time saying that you're interested in sharing your photos, and we can just walk through your photos. That's what we did at the last get together we had at 5440, and it was a lot of fun to do that and just sharing pictures, and that's kind of what we need right now, is to see all the beauty in the world. So if that's something you would be comfortable sharing your photos, let me know, and we can just kind of make a list, and however often we want to get together, we can have 3 people share their photos, or however we decide to make that work. And then I'm part of a couple photo groups on Facebook, and a lot of them are doing photo challenges right now. So I had that idea as well, is if we came to these meetings and decided on a challenge for the time period between meetings, and then when we got together, we could share our photos or share them on our Facebook page. But it'd be fun to come back together and say, oh, here are all the things I took a picture of that are red in my backyard, and we could each go through and kind of share those photos. Just try to get better at training your eye, I guess. So potentially that could happen as well. So if you have any ideas, just shoot them to me by email. If you don't have my email, it's volunteer@refugestewards.org. And then before we end up here, I wanted to give Dave a chance to talk, since he is a board member for the Stewards, if you wanted to do a little plug for the Stewards.
Oh, okay. I think everybody knows. It's the Columbia Gorge Refuge Stewards. If you're not a member, it's you can go to refugestewards.org to join, and it's only, I think, $15 for a year. And we have our newsletter if you'd like to sign up for that. It includes announcing when we are going to be doing events, but also updates about the closure of the refuge. And of course, we're always looking for people to help with the board and committees, including our photo committee, our youth photo committee.
Are you conducting virtual board meetings now?
Yes, we are. Our last meeting we used, I experimented with Cisco's WebEx, and it went okay. But I think Zoom is easier. So I think this is our first meeting using Zoom, and it's I think it was just a lot easier for people to plug in than with the WebEx. The disadvantage of the Zoom is that people who don't have a computer, we have some board members that just don't have a computer, and so they want to call in. So WebEx offers a phone number to call in. Zoom doesn't guarantee that call-in number. So so we'll see we'll see what we go. I'm not the president anymore. I've handed off the baton. We rotate president every year. So Brett and Randy are co-presidents. They'll be running the next meeting, and it'll be up to them as to what tool they want to use for that.
I had one more idea, if Ken was open to it. Jared, I don't know. But is it possible maybe once in a while we could send, or maybe each of us, if it's a small enough group, could send you one photo that you would consider, what would you do to improve it? And maybe do that for us either, in real time or beforehand or something like that. I think that would be really fun. But I don't know. Obviously, that takes time for you, and I'd certainly be happy. As some of you know, Ken does sometimes sell his photos, and I have a beautiful one that I have on canvas from Steigerwald. It's one of Ken's photos with the Northern Harrier, and it's just gorgeous. And but anyway, I would love to just see what, maybe one of my photos that I consider pretty decent, what you would do to make it look even nicer.
I would have a blast with that.
Yeah.
I often look at people's photos and go, "Oh, if I could just." But then people are, they really, I did that once with a photographer that on Flickr. And I said, "Oh, I know. So I figured out something in Photoshop," and I asked if she would mind if I edited her photo and sent her a copy. And the reply was, "I edit my own photos."
Oh.
Okay.
Took it totally
All
wrong.
right.
I mean, I was just excited about trying to try that out, and wow, she took it personally. But that I would consider that fun. Okay. So either way, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Any other thoughts before we end?
So just further to that, how would we get pictures to you, Ken?
Yeah. So my name, can you see it up there? It's Ken Pitts. Do you see that? Yeah. And so my email is kenpitts@gmail.com. I was the first Ken Pitts. It's all small case. I have a technology forward daughter who said, "Hey, Gmail is starting to take accounts, and it's going to be the email." And so anyway, I got in as kenpitts@gmail.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us on this first try of our virtual meetings. And we'll definitely plan on doing another one here. How does this time work for folks? Would you prefer it later in the day or earlier in the day if we keep it on Sundays?
I have to adjust my dinner, but that's fine. All schedules are kind of loose these days.
Sure. Yeah. All right. Okay. Well, I'll make sure you guys are all on my my distribution list for this photo group, and we will be in touch. Thanks again for joining.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you, Ken.
Thanks, Ken.
Thank you for sticking it out with me.
Thank
See ya.
you.
Ken.
This was great. Thank you.